Alright, so today we're going to talk about something called the Box and Whiskers Plot. This is a graph that you will commonly see in statistics. It's a graph that displays a visual summary of data using quartile measurements of that data. If you don't know what a quartile is, no problem, we're going to talk about it in a second. It's also, again, as I said, it's a statistical graph. It's useful for showing distribution, so it's how the number, where the numbers are. Spread, that's how close those numbers are, spread apart they are, and any skewing, which means which direction the bulk of the data might shift towards. Two important terms we want to keep in mind is the median, which is the middle value. You can find that by splitting all the values in half. And then the quartiles, which are the quarter values. You identify those by splitting, instead of into half, you're going to split it into 4 parts. You could also think about finding that as the middle value of each half. So you find the median first, and then the middle of that half, and the median, and then the middle of the second half. So most commonly, we're going to talk about first quartile and third quartile. Those are those first quarter and third quarter, because the second quartile is also the 2/4 or the half / the median. All right, but anyway, let's get going. We're going to make a box and whiskers plot. Example 1, odd. We've got an odd amount of values. We've got 9 scores right here of a math quiz. So our steps to make this, we're going to list the data from least to greatest. I've done that for you already. That's just going to help us find the median a little bit easier on those quartiles. So we're going to find the median of that set of data. So as I said, we have 9 pieces of data. So we're going to find that middle one. That middle value right there is going to be this 16. And so then I'm just going to keep note of that. I'm going to put median equals 16 so I don't forget that. Next thing I need to find is the first quartile measurement. So that's that middle of the first half. Now when we do this, we're not going to include this odd median. We're just going to look at these 4 numbers right here, and the median of those would be since we have 2 numbers in the middle, we're going to find the average of those. So our first quartile is going to be 9, because 8 plus 10 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. We are then going to have to do the same thing to find the third quartile, but instead look at the second half. So since we had an odd amount, I'm not going to include that middle value, but of these 4, right there, there'd be in between the 17 and 19, that would be 18. So our third Q, and the Q standing for quartile, is going to be 18. So now I've got the median, the first quartile, and the third quartile. Now I want to identify the minimum and maximum values. The minimum value is simply just what's the smallest number. We've got 5. The maximum, what's the largest? We've got 20. Then we want to find a scale that fits that range of data. So something that goes from at least 5 to 20. So I'm just going to start with a scale that starts at 1 and goes to 20. And now we are going to actually draw the box and the whiskers. So it says draw lines for the median, first quartile, third quartile, and connect as a box. So our median was 16, so I'm going to put a little line right here above the 16. Our first quartile was 9, so I'm going to put a little line right here above the 9, and then the third was 18. So same thing, and then it says connect as a box. So I'm just going to kind of connect those 3 lines together. And then it says draw lines for the minimum and maximum numbers and connect to make the whiskers. So our max was at 20, our min was at 5, and then I'm going to just draw a little line to connect those like this. So that's when we say box and whiskers. This obviously looks like the box. These are like the whiskers coming out. And that's showing the data. And since we have the median in the first quartile and third quartile, we can kind of think of this as like 25% of the data, the next 25% of the data, the next 25, and then the last 25th. So I'm going to actually do a second one. We're going to make one more, and then we can talk a little about what we can learn from it. Go a little bit faster this time. We've got another math quiz, but this time we have an even amount of values. We have 10 values instead of 9. And so we're going to put them in order from least to greatest. And then now we're going to look for our median is the first thing we need to find. Right? That was step number 2. We have 15 and 17, so what's in between those for our median? If we got 2 values, we take the average, so 16. So we have the same median. We're going to find the first quartile and the third quartile. For the first quartile, since we didn't have a specific number, we're actually going to look at the first half of the data and find what is that. So we've got 5 numbers there, so 13 is going to be our first quartile. First Q equals 13. And then For our second half of data, again, we're going to, since there wasn't a specific median number, we're going to include that whole second half. That's going to be 18 for our third quartile. And then we're going to look for our minimum and maximum. Our min in this case was 12, and our max in this case was 20. We're going to graph those things. The first three numbers give us the box. So median at 16, first quartile is 13, third quartile was 18. Draw a box to connect those together. And then our minimum was 12. Our max was 20 again. And then draw the lines to connect the whisker. So it's a little messy, but you get the idea. So we've got two Box and Whiskers plots. Some quick things about those two ones. So we've got, again, each of these lines is signifying 25% in. So that we can look at both of these. 50% of the data is up here in the A and B range on that quiz, 16 to 20. And then if we look down here, the other half of the data would be below it. Now we can notice that this 25% right here, and then this 25%, we can see it's a lot closer together. So this is when I said it shows spread. So you can see the data is not nearly as spread out. The numbers are much closer up here. We can also see this is way more spread out on the left side. Even though the top half of the two classes were similar, the bottom half was definitely not. We have a lot more spread on that. So that's a Box and Whiskers plot. That's how to make one. That's kind of what it shows. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what you can actually get from them and sort of looking at some statements. So this is like interpreting a Box and Whiskers plot. So if you still want to try to understand how they work and what you can learn from them and what you can't tell from them, please keep paying attention. So we've got a quick Box and Whiskers plot I just found online. Cars sold per day for 2 different sales reps. You can see that they don't have the little lines going up and down. That's okay. Sometimes you'll see that. You also see that, again, these are horizontal. Sometimes you actually see they go up and down, and the number line would go like along the side. But so we've got sales rep A, sales rep B. We're going to look at some statements about them and see if these are true, false, or if we could not determine the answer. Both sales reps sold more than 14 cars over half the days that data was collected. So we're saying over half the days they're selling more than 14 cars. Now if we actually look at this right here, 14 was that middle value. So they're selling more than 14 cars exactly half of the days. So we could say right here that this right here would be an example of something that would be a false statement, because we could say, oops, it's 14 cars not over half the days. We could just say half of the days to make that true. Sales rep B had the day with both the most cars sold and the day with the least amount sold by anyone was sales rep B with 4, and most, the max, was 24. So that is absolutely true. Next statement, sales rep A sold 12 cars on the first day. Now if we look up here, this is going to be whenever you see a specific number and they're talking about a Box and Whiskers plot, you're going to have to think carefully. We know the min and the max, but everything else in between we're not totally sure of. So even though we have a dot here at 12, we don't know for sure if there was a day he sold 12 cars. We don't know if that was in between two values. We're not totally sure about that. So we're going to have to think that that 12, it could be the first day. It could also not be. It's just something that we're not going to know for certain. So I'm going to put a little question mark there. Sales rep A had data that was less spread out than sales rep B. We look at the spread of the data. Sales rep A, you can see it's all closer together. Sales rep B, more spread out, both this bottom half and the top half with the max and the mean. So this right here is absolutely, that first part's true, but then it says this means they were less consistent. That is not the part of it. It's actually going to be more. If your data is closer together, it means you're more consistent, means the numbers are closer together. Okay. Next one, on the days when they sold less than 14 cars, sales rep B had more varied amounts of cars sold. If we look up here, less than 14, more varied. Yeah, it's more spread out. We can see even this second 25%, right? It's definitely more spread out. That is absolutely true. Next statement, we got two more. On 10% of the days, sales rep A sold fewer than 10 cars. Now, we only know, since it's quartiles, median, quartile, we only know the 25% marks. So if there's any question about 10% or not a 25, 50%, we don't know for certain if that's true. Even though it looks like about 10, we could guess maybe it's around there, but we don't know that for certain, so that's going to be an unknown. And then the last statement we've got on here, on 25% of the day, sales rep B sold fewer cars than sales rep A's worst day of sales. If we look up here, we can see 25% of the days. Remember, each of these chunks is 25%. The worst day was here at 8. 25% is down here in between. So that right there is absolutely going to be true as well. All right, so that's just some interpreting, sort of thinking about what types of statements you can and can't make. Anything about the quartiles, 50%, 25%, you can. Some of the specifics about in between, that's one of the main things with Box and Whiskers Plots is you don't have those in between numbers, so you can't make those statements unless you got more information. All right, good luck with your Box and Whiskers work.